Welcome to the Slick Sixguns Network. I'm your host, Slick Sixguns, and I'm here to provide educational videos on the Western shooting sports. So, if you're interested in stuff like that, consider subscribing. Well, today what we are going to be doing is we are going to be talking about a quite debated subject, and that is the subject of what is 45 Colt and what is 45 Long Colt, and what is the correct terminology, how did we get there, and all that good stuff. So first off, I want to apologize this took so long because YouTube changed up their live stream sessions for whatever reason, and so whatever, I got through it, and now I'm here. Hopefully you're viewing this, and I'm excited to be here. So let's get into the live stream. What we are talking about is this round right here, the 45 Colt. Those of you who use 45 Colt, you've often heard the term of 45 Colt or 45 Long Colt. Well, because this is such a debated term, please refrain from trying to beat me up and also trying to beat anyone else who believes that it is either 45 Long Colt or 45 Colt. Sometimes I find myself getting frustrated anyway when people say what I consider to be the wrong term. But recently I've done some research into it, and I think you should too. And it's actually quite interesting. The thing is that when someone refers to the 45 Colt round or the 45 Long Colt round, whatever term they're using, they're referring to the exact same round, period, end of story. Regardless of what you think, they are both the same. There is no difference when you're talking about it, at least in nowadays terms. Now, however, getting into the history of it, we must understand that the 45 Colt round came out with the 1873 Single Action Army, the Colt model piece, the Colt Peacemaker, when it was being produced for the United States Army in its trials for being competed as the standard sidearm for U.S. troops. And the thing that they came out with was they wanted a big bore handgun, specifically chambered in .44 American, but they came out with the 45 Colt round. And the Colt Single Action Army went up against the model number 3 produced by Smith & Wesson, and the 45 Colt Single Action Army won the competition, and it became the standard sidearm. So fast forward a couple years later, and what happens is you have the production of the Smith & Wesson, or the Smith & Wesson, Fast forward a couple of years later, and you have the production of the Schofield revolver in 1875, and this was a proprietary cartridge. This was a proprietary weapon as well, produced by a private citizen, specifically a soldier by the name of Major Schofield, and they also came out with their own proprietary round known as 45 Schofield. The Army liked those two. It was different than the model number 3, and it was adopted into the U.S. service as a standard sidearm as well, along with the Colt Single Action Army. However, it was chambered in a different round known as 45 Schofield. So, where do we get the difference? Well, what ends up happening is that when rounds get shipped to different troops and different stations, for those of you who have all dealt with logistics in any sort of way, they tried to make it as simple as possible. They understood that the caliber was 45 caliber, and they didn't really take into account that the rounds would be shipped. To units that might have the wrong type of pistols. And what ends up happening is you have units that are getting the 45 Schofield round, which is a little bit shorter than this, and then you have units that are getting the 45 Colt round, which they have the 45 Schofield revolver, not the Colt Single Action Army, and those that have the Colt Single Action Army are getting the 45 Schofield. That didn't really produce a problem for those who had the 45 Colt Single Action Armies, because they could technically shoot both rounds out of it. they could chamber the 45 Colt and the 45 Smith & Wesson, or the 45, the 45 Schofield. However, the 45 Schofield guys couldn't shoot 45 Colt rounds and therefore didn't have ammunition available. So what happened was supply clerks and logistics officers decided to come up with a name for the cartridge of 45 Schofield and 45 Colt that would help distinguish between the two. And what they would do is, prior to this, they would just ship it saying 45 caliber on the box, and then what would happen is you'd obviously have that mix-up. But these people came up with the moniker of 45 Long Colt to discern between the two, and that would be put on boxes, shipped out to units so that the correct ammunition would be used in the correct firearm. However, just to keep you guys kind of in the loop, the cartridge was used well into the early 1900s when the Army started coming out with double action revolvers, and then eventually developing their Colt 1911 automatic pistol, which shot the 45 ACP, or automatic compact pistol. And from there on out, the same kind of situation could have occurred, but they ended up sticking with the 45 Long Colt versus 45 ACP. But for all intents and purposes, 45 Long Colt had kind of died out until resurgence in the 1950s with Western films coming about, and then you had people wanting Colt single action armies, and they would come out with 44 and 45 caliber. But the thing is that if you are ever interested in really knowing the true answer to this question, even though they are both the same, and no matter what people say, you can call it 45 Long Colt, you can call it 45 Colt, it is both correct. However, if you really want to get technical about it, you would refer to the I would refer to the bottom of cartridges, look at them, and if you look at the bottom of 45 Colt ammunition, you will see that it says 45 Colt on the bottom. So that being said, and on top of that, if you look at weapons nowadays, they don't say 45 Long Colt ammunition on them, they say 45 Colt. So if you want to get technically correct, the correct answer to this question is, do we call it 45 Colt or 45 Long Colt? If you want to be technical about it, call it 45 Colt, because that is the correct answer. But if you say 45 Long Colt, it doesn't matter. It is still the same cartridge. It is just something that was used to help mitigate the difference in logistics issues for the Army early on in the late 19th century, when they had two different cartridges for two different revolvers that both fired 45 caliber. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more interesting content. Also, take a look at the description section and check out my supporters and see what they're all about. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Have a good one. See you next week.